Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week's show has a unique guest because despite the fact he holds political office and has appeared on ballots in elections as a candidate, he's not a politician. For those of you civics majors out there, you know I'm talking about a judge. His name is Justice of the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Justice David Wecht. It is somewhat counterintuitive in our political system to elect our judges, while at the same time, they cannot discuss politics or partisanship or even issues that might come before them. Usually, issues determine political outcomes, so it's unique that they can't discuss those things, and yet people have to vote for them. Since this is a very political talk show, it's always a challenge for this host to interview judges. However, because of my relationship with Justice Wecht, that is personal, and that extends to my father's past friendship with his famous father, Dr. Cyril Wecht, this interview was truly a pleasure. Justice Wecht's family hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, although David was born in Baltimore, Maryland, because his mother, Sigrid, was stationed in Maryland in her service to the United States Air Force. He spent time in the early 60s in Washington as well because his famous father, as I acknowledged, Dr. Cyril Wecht, was also spending most of his time in Washington in the early 60s as a member of the Warren Commission, which was famously impaneled to study the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. After their government service, the Wechts returned to Pittsburgh, and David graduated from the prestigious prep school, Shadyside Academy. Justice Wecht then went to Yale, undergrad, where he was elected to the Phi Beta Kappa Society and graduated summa cum laude, and then went on to Yale Law School, where he served on the prestigious Yale Law Journal. After receiving his Juris Doctorate from Yale, Justice Wecht went on to clerk in the federal judiciary in the Washington, D.C. Federal District. Justice Wecht first served as a judge in the Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County in 2003. And then he ran and was elected statewide to the Superior Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in 2011. In 2015, Justice Wecht ran for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. During that campaign, Justice Wecht appeared on the Volpe Report, then only in its infancy, 2 years old, before he eventually went on to win election to the High Court of Pennsylvania. It's hard to believe 10 years have gone by, as the Volpe Report is now in its 12th year. So it was kind of a time warp for me and he as we reminisced about that show. Although this time, he is only running in a retention election, which means this November, Justice Wecht will appear, David Wecht, will appear on voters' ballots. But the only question will be whether or not to retain him. It's a simple yes-no vote. If you want to retain him, you vote yes. We think you will enjoy today's show.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Mr. Justice, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you, Chuck. It's delightful to be here with you.
Well, as we talked a little bit off camera, I know I've seen you and talked to you in the last 10 years, but I have to say, this, as my audience knows, this is the 12th year, believe it or not, of the Volpe Report. You would have been on, I think, around my second year or so, and it's hard to believe that you're up for your 10-year retention vote, statewide yes-no vote, to retain your Supreme Court justice seat, so to speak. The first question is, why don't you explain to the people of Pennsylvania why you decided initially to be a Supreme Court justice, and has the experience lived up to the expectation, I guess?
So I've been doing this judge thing for a while, Chuck. I was first appointed by first I was nominated for a vacancy on the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas by Governor Mark Schweiker.
Okay.
And then the Senate went home before they got to it. And so then when Governor Rendell came in, he resubmitted it and the Senate confirmed me. It was 50-0 bipartisan. And then I took the bench, and then this was in beginning of 03. So I had to run in the May primary of 03, and I won both the Republican and Democratic nominations and won on both tickets in the fall. And I served in the Common Pleas Court for almost 9 years. 2 of them I supervised the family division by appointment of the Supreme Court as the administrative judge. And then I was Superior Court judge for 4 years. And I love the law. I love all the jurisprudence. I love deciding cases. I love thinking and writing about the law. And it seemed important for me to try to seek one of the 3 vacancies on the Supreme Court in 2015, particularly because, as your viewers will probably recall, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania had been in a period of turmoil. There had been scandal. There had been a lot of problems. There had been infighting and bitterness. And I thought it was time to set the court on the right course and to give the people what they deserve in terms of a conscientious justice and one who's focused on the work and not on nonsense. And that's what I've tried to do.
All right. And based on that answer, it's pretty clear that you had a pretty good expectation of what the job entailed. That's why it's also somewhat of a pleasure to have this interview with you. First of all, let me be clear. You know, we have to declare bias, and full disclosure requires that I consider you a friend. My father was a good and close friend with your father, Dr. Cyril Wecht, who, look, despite your best efforts, you may always be in the shadow of his national fame. Warren Commission lawyer. He may have, though, even that may pale when they make a movie where your character is the central figure in it. And I'm talking about the movie Concussion with Will Smith, of course. And in their portrayal of your father was wonderful. I have to say that one line about how, you know, the church used to own Sundays. Well,
yeah.
Now it's the NFL. It's their day. They've taken that day. That's who you want to go up against. He was given a warning to Dr. Amalu, who, of course, he famously allowed, despite all of the pressure from the football gods, to proceed along the lines that he was going in his autopsies and forensic, work, that he discovered CTE, that we now know it has shaped lives of thousands of people. The NFL is different every time you watch it because of what he found, and more importantly, what your father allowed him to find, despite all the political pressure. So talk a little bit about your dad, Dr. Cyril Wecht.
Yeah, we had so much fun seeing that movie, Chuck. My mom and dad got to go to the set because my dad consulted with the director on, some of the technical issues, et cetera. And my mom and dad got to meet all the stars in that film. And the one that they did not get to meet was Albert Brooks, who played my father. And that's because his acting method was that he never wanted to meet the person that he was portraying because it interfered with his own research of the character. It's kind of peculiar, but that's what his method was. But there came a time during the filming that my parents were on the set, and the director said, Dr. Wecht, would you be willing to have dinner with Alec Baldwin? He's a huge fan of your criticism of the Warren Commission. And my mom said, yes, we would. We would love to do that. So
Wow.
my mom and dad got to have dinner with Alec Baldwin, and they really enjoyed it. He was really engrossed in the JFK assassination.
Sure.
He had studied it. And throughout the rest of my father's life, he and Alec Baldwin maintained a correspondence. And, my dad always felt that he was Baldwin was a very intelligent analyst of the Kennedy assassination. So anyway, you asked about my dad. My dad grew up in Pittsburgh's Lower Hill District. His parents were immigrants, and he went to Pitt, and then he went to Pitt Medical School. And when he finished medical school, Uncle Sam said, "Now, now you got to report." So um, he joined the U.S. Air Force, and he was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. And while he was serving in the U.S. Air Force, he met my mother, who was serving in the U.S. Air Force. They were on the same base, and that's why I'm here.
Right. Well, I would say that those are significant shoes to follow. But there's a great way you started in setting out upon your own path. You're a graduate of Yale Law School and the prestigious Yale Law Journal, which, of course, we talked about is the answer to the Harvard Law Review. Probably one of the most cited documents in all of our most famous court cases from the U.S. Supreme Court, as well as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Yale Law Journal, like the Harvard Law Review, is, I'm sure, cited and quoted in more things, in more legal journals and publications. So your own pedigree in your own right is pretty amazing. So there's great respect for what your family and what you have accomplished in your career to prepare you for what you do now.
Well, that's very kind of you, Chuck. Of course, I only went to law school. My dad he graduated from medical school, and he got 2 law degrees. When he finished his service in the U.S. Air Force, he moved to Baltimore with my mom. My mom's enlistment was still ongoing, so she got transferred to finish her service at Andrews Air Base in Maryland. And while mom and dad were in Baltimore, my dad was going to law school at night at Maryland while he worked in the medical examiner's office in Baltimore. And he got a law degree in Maryland. Then they moved back to Pittsburgh, and he got another law degree at Pitt. So he wasn't just a 1 law degree like me. He was 2 law degrees and a medical degree.
Yeah, that's how they make movies about you.
Yeah, right.
But as I said, Yale Law Journal, Yale Law graduate yourself is impressive. And before we wind down and take a quick break, and then we'll go to the second half of the show, I also want to point out, we talked a lot about your dad. Your mom's history is somewhat wonderful as well. She grows up as a young girl in occupied Norway. When I say occupied Norway, that's Nazi occupation during World War II. So what a rich, wellspring you have to draw on a family history. There are very few that can draw on what you can draw on.
Yeah. Mom's had an interest, and Mom's still with us. Thankfully, we lost Dad about 2 years ago. Mom's still with us, and like you say, she grew up in Norway, and the Germans invaded there early in the war because they wanted to protect their northern flank from Britain, and there was the heavy water facility north of Oslo. So it was very strategic. That's why the Wehrmacht went up there early. And my mom has, childhood memories of their occupation. In fact, because she was just a wee little girl, her father would secrete notes for the Norwegian underground, in her clothing, and send her walking to the neighbors because the Germans wouldn't search, a tiny little girl. Right. So she would communicate about whatever kind of underground activities they had up there during the German occupation.
Right. And one final question because I know I'm a dog lover, and I just, in fact, kissed Gretel goodbye as I came to shoot this show. That wonderful picture of your dog is, of course, behind you. Tell us a little bit about, is it her?
It's a he. It's a he. And his name is Newman. And it's not for Paul Newman. It's because when my wife bought him at the kennel, or rather the farm out in Lancaster County, and drove him back, he cuddled in her lap, but he was fidgeting and do whatever he was doing. So she reflexively said, "Oh, Newman," like Newman on Seinfeld.
I was going to say, remember? The Newman character.
Oh, Newman, right?
Yeah.
So that's the Newman. He's named for Newman on Seinfeld.
Oh, wow.
Newman, not Paul Newman, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, again, that's a great backdrop. And Mr. Justice, we now will take our quick commercial announcement break. And when we come back, we'll get to the part of the show that will cover, some of in my first question, I'll tell you what it's going to be. You know, you now don't run for the office you've won. You're a Supreme Court justice. It's simply a retention vote. There are no opposition candidates. All folks that want to do to keep you where you are is have the opportunity to vote yes. Of course, there is opposition promoting a no vote. So we're going to hit that head on when we come back after this break.
Great.
There are more places you can see the Volpe Report. Watch every Sunday morning at 10:30 on Fox 56 or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report. More ways to watch. Still the same premier political talk show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians.
Mr. Justice, welcome back after our break.
Thank you, Chuck.
And now this is a political talk show, of course. And although judges, run from the word politics, as they should, you stand for and hold effectively a political office. Your name will be on the ballot, as we already indicated before I broke. It's a yes-no vote. It's pretty simple. So, the folks of the Commonwealth, the citizens, voters of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are going to be asked about Justice David Wecht, whether or not he should be retained, yes or no. So basically, you get to look in the camera and tell them why effectively they should vote to retain you, what you brought to the office, and what you want to continue to do, and what work and what goals you have for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chuck. It's been my honor to serve on the Supreme Court. I have about 38 years of legal experience since my graduation in 1987 from law school. And it's going on 23 years of judicial experience since my appointment in the beginning of February of 2003 to the Common Pleas Bench. It's an honor to serve. It's a privilege to serve. I don't take it for granted. I come to the job every day with the same level of huge enthusiasm that I took to the bench on my very first day as a common pleas judge. I love the law. I love working conscientiously in the law. It's constantly challenging. It's invigorating. It's something that for which I have enormous enthusiasm. I always tell people, if you meet a judge at any level, from magisterial district judge to common pleas to superior or Commonwealth to Supreme Court, who is cynical or jaded or embittered and whining and complaining about the job, just tell them to retire and make room for somebody who would appreciate the responsibility and the opportunity, because that's what it is. It's a job. You're never going to get rich being a judge, but you're going to have a fulfilling, important responsibility in our civic society. In America, we don't decide things by arm wrestling or street fights or pistols at dawn like we used to. We decide things in a court of law according to rules and laws, and that's what I do. And as I mentioned earlier, we used to have a lot of problems on our Supreme Court, and I think people can look at their Supreme Court now and be proud of it. It's a court that functions well. We get along with each other. We're collegial. We're focused on the mission and not on distractions. And I think we're known around the country as a Supreme Court that delivers quality opinions, and those are not usually unanimous. We have a lot of debates internally, and then externally, so to speak. When the opinions come out, people can read the majority opinions and then the dissenting and concurring opinions and decide for themselves which view they feel is the better perspective on the law.
Right. Well, I can't recall and give appropriate attribution. It wasn't me that said this, but it always stuck with me. And I forget, again, the author, but the quote was in the book, may you live in interesting times. I want to say by default Shakespeare said that somewhere, but I can't say who, but it's not, not me, so I want to be careful to quote it. But I got the gist of it, and they were referring to life. May you live in interesting times. I would apply that standard. That has clearly been the case. First of all, you've already indicated that when you came into office, there was some scandal. It's stemming back to our Attorney General of Pennsylvania. She had gotten herself in some trouble, which she ultimately paid the price of getting convicted criminally for. But in that back and forth, she effectively smeared the Supreme Court, challenging in emails what some justices had done. Not you or any of this current Supreme Court. I want to be clear. But as you said, when you came into the court, there had been some scandal, resignation, et cetera. So you came in under that backdrop. And then you get to sit and maybe get into the pace of the court for a few years. COVID hits. And we have an unprecedented COVID shutdown by Governor Wolf. And since that time, the climate has been so supercharged with politics. So I'm not asking you to touch any of that because it's not appropriate. But what I did want to say, at least get your comment, it has to have been interesting, to say the least. So I'd like you to describe the atmosphere of what you came into and what has continued, really. The partisanship fight.
Well, back in 2015, Chuck, there was as I had mentioned, and as you mentioned, there were a lot of problems going on around the Supreme Court. And I think when my colleagues and I ran, and I think we had a sort of a tacit understanding that if we were fortunate to win, we would focus on the law, focus on the job, and not get distracted with the kinds of things that unfortunately had distracted folks, some of the folks on the court in the years past. And for those who don't recall, within a 2-year period, 4 seats opened up on the court. 2 opened up because 2 justices had to resign because of an email pornography scandal. Yeah. Another one was convicted of a crime, and a 4th one aged out of the court. The 4th seat did not open up early enough to go on the 2015 ballot, so that was on the 2017 ballot. But on the 2015 ballot, there were 7 people running in the general election for 3 seats because there were 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and an independent. And each party, Democrat and Republican, had more than that in their primaries. Unlike that year, this year is a nonpartisan retention election. As you indicated, it's a yes/no vote, and folks can vote yes or no for anybody, regardless of whether they are independent, Republican, Democrat, or what have you. Right. As long as people are registered to vote, I think by October 20, don't hold me to that, I believe that's the cutoff, they can choose to register however they like. As long as they're registered to vote in Pennsylvania, they can vote in person or by mail. Right. And indicate whether they think the 3 of us, Justices Donahue, Dougherty, and I, deserve to serve an additional 10-year term. I hope they'll say yes. I think we do a conscientious, good job. It's not a partisan job. It's a job interpreting the law. If people are curious, they can go to the court's website and poke around all they want and look at the various opinions that folks have written and judge for themselves what they think. I think Netflix is probably more fun. Yeah. But if people want to read those opinions, they're welcome to do so. I hope they do.
Well, what I would do from where I sit is to do my own judging, if you will. I would say that the highest standard that I would attribute to you, and I mean it in a good way, would be if the screams and howls come from both sides. Because every time you make a decision, a lot of people get angry. Of course, a lot of people are happy. Earlier on, back in the early part of COVID, the Republicans were mostly angry with the lockdowns, the 2020 election. You issued a bunch of opinions that didn't make them happy. But since that time, fair play, you've issued a lot of decisions that made the Democrats furious, throwing out ballots that you felt shouldn't have been counted. I have a very close personal friendship with United States Senator Dave McCormick. And obviously, the Casey faction, and a long-term incumbent U.S. Senator, and the Democratic hierarchy and party of Pennsylvania was extremely upset with some of your rulings relative to some of those cases. So the point I'm making is that if you are effectively making half the people happy and half the people unhappy in an even-handed way, and that keeps flipping who's happy and who's unhappy, that would be the highest, I would say, standard of integrity that could be attributed. And based on that standard, I would say that you have fulfilled your mission for the people of Pennsylvania. You have clearly acted on your judicial training and knowledge and conscience and integrity matters, and you have demonstrated those, Mr. Justice, in the highest way. So while I guess it's the who decides whether you're, the qualifications, whether you're qualified, supremely qualified, I would say you have done everything, in my opinion, to warrant a yes vote on the retention. And beside the fact that you're my friend, and as I said, I don't agree with all your opinions, but I know they're founded on judicial principles and integrity. And if that's all it is, I'll live with the results. And as I said, you've made most people happy and unhappy in your term about 50-50, which says that's probably about the way it should be. So any closing comment?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chuck. I think the important thing that's very kind of you. I think the important thing for people to understand is, and by the way, all three of us, Donahue, Doherty, and Wecht, we all got the highest rating from the Pennsylvania Bar Association. They recommend all three of us for retention. And I hope people will retain all of us. I think it's really important for everybody to understand that unlike folks in the executive and legislative branches of our government, it's never our job to pick the result we want and work for that result, which is perfectly fine and totally appropriate for political officials in the legislative and executive branches. That's not our job. So if we're doing our job correctly, we're bound to disappoint and anger people that are maybe our friends, because we can never pick a result and then work backward to sort of justify that result. We have to apply the law and then just follow it through and reason through it. And I don't care if Smith wins or Jones wins. I don't care who wins. If I ever care about who's going to win a case, that means I need to recuse myself, withdraw from that case, because I cannot care about who wins or who loses. What I need to care about is the legal reasoning. And that's what it's all about to me. And it's really hard for a lot of folks to get their heads around that, because it's, we live in such a political world. We live in such a hyper-partisan world where people focus on like team A, I'm on team A, or I'm on team B, and I got to view everything through that prism, which, again, I understand that's how life works these days. But when people look at the judiciary, they have to understand that's not the songbook we're singing from. We're charged with the mission of applying the law. And sometimes that's going to make folks happy, and sometimes that's going to make folks unhappy, but we cannot concern ourselves with that. We can't let that affect us. It's not a job for the faint of heart, but you have to have the integrity just to follow the law to where you think it takes you.
Well, Mr. Justice, on that note, we'll end, because I want to say that's as fine a closing argument for your yes retention as anybody could have scripted. Wonderfully said, from the heart, but spot on. And if more people played ball in the political side and didn't demonize across the aisle and work toward what we can agree on, not what we disagree on, America and Pennsylvania would be a better place. You're doing your part. Keep up the good work, Justice, and Godspeed.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Great talking with you.
Thank you, Justice.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.